What's up everybody? In today's devlog, we're going to be reflecting on why Taviana Origins was delayed. We put quite a lot of thought into making this video as it contains some personal information that we weren't quite sure if we just want to put out there in the open. But we decided to do it anyway, and the reason for that is, well, we want you to know why it was delayed, but also because when we look at all these quote-unquote successful people or companies in hindsight, we tend to think that the fact that they became who they are right now was inevitable. But we rarely get a glimpse at what really went on behind the scenes, all the countless challenges that had to be overcome, and the fact that most of the things we all take for granted today were just a hair's breadth away from never existing at all had it not been for the immense dedication, sacrifice, and often just luck on the part of the people behind them. Now, if you've been following the project from the beginning, you'll know that we originally planned to release the early access in 2018, but that didn't go to plan, so let's take a look at why. When we started development, we had just come from modding. For those of you that are new here, we made a zombie mod called Origins Mod for a game called Armed Assault 2. And we were pretty young too. The majority of our team, including myself, were in the range of like 18 to 25 years old. And so based on our experience, we thought that making a game would be relatively easy, but it turned out to be quite the opposite. When it comes to modding a game, you already have 90% of the assets at your disposal. All the lighting has been correctly set up, all the back-end programming has been thought through, all the UI and the animations and everything has already been taken care of. All you have to do is create some assets, write a couple of scripts and make them work with the engine, and Bob's your auntie. It's like getting a bucket of Legos and building something out of them. But when it comes to making a game, even in a sandbox engine such as Unreal Engine, you have to take care of everything, literally everything, from keeping track of which button was just pressed by the user, to which UI widget should be on top of all the other widgets at this particular point in time, loading system settings, and so on and so forth. You don't even have a main menu. You have to literally find out how something as simple as a dialog box that asks you if you want to keep the resolution you just selected works, and then program it. You have to design and cast each Lego piece before you can even begin building anything out of them. And on top of that, we had to learn how to use the new engine, make all the assets, hire people, learn how to do contracts with people, and so on and so forth. And to complicate matters further, Unreal Engine 4 wasn't even finished yet. The last version of it was only released in August of last year. That's less than 6 months before this video was recorded. So we had to deal with bugs in the engine itself. Needless to say, we overestimated our ability to deliver the product in 2018. The next big ticket item was solving the funding problem. Thankfully, we were smart enough to start social media pages for our mod back in the day, so we had the option of taking the community funded route. There are a few options that you have when it comes to securing funding, from classic bank loans to venture capitalists. We might also do a video on funding because that's a whole topic in itself, but we opted for the community funding route because we just didn't want a third party to have that much control over the project, and that turned out to be quite a good choice, as you'll find out later in the video. We had two options when it came to community funding: Kickstarter or a lesser known platform at the time called Patreon. Truth be told, we had no idea how much interest there would be in the game, and we were afraid that if we didn't manage to hit our funding goal on Kickstarter, the whole idea would go down the tubes right off the bat. So we opted for Patreon, where there is no set goal and you kind of just go along with whatever people donate each month. Patreon has grown into a pretty popular platform since then. The next issue before starting a Patreon page was having something to show people. We knew that we needed a trailer, and that's what we proceeded to work on. A trailer is easier said than done. You need building models, and character models, and animations, and sounds, and trees, and a whole laundry list of other items, plus the map itself, and you gotta learn the engine to make it all work. And so with the trailer, having no management experience, no prior knowledge of Unreal Engine, having made our first executive decisions, the development of the whole game was set into motion and we set off on our journey into the unknown. And we set off to quite a rocky start indeed, because a few months in, I had suddenly collapsed. I went to see the doctor the next day and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So they sent me to the hospital where I underwent a CAT scan. Half an hour later, the doctors rushed in, gave me 5 minutes to make a single phone call, told me to sign this piece of paper and wheeled me off to the operating theater. When I woke up again, I was told that a small portion of my small intestine was removed. A few days later, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. I have since made a full recovery and I'm very thankful to the doctors for saving my life. Shout out to any doctors out there. This had a pretty big impact on the team because we're not just work colleagues but also friends. I've blurred out my face on the photo because despite the fact that most of you guys are awesome, there are definitely individuals out there that mean us no good and I don't want them to misuse it. This experience only motivated me to work on the game more because life is fragile. We truly don't know how much time we have left and I want to use my time to do what I am passionate about. Nevertheless, a couple of months later, the trailer was done, the early access day was announced, and the funding problem was more or less taken care of.
When the doors closed, we realized that we're all alone.
Initially, we just wanted to include the city of Mitrovic and the surrounding area in the early access version, but we ran into our first major complication with Unreal Engine 4. Remember I said that the final version of the engine was just released a few months ago? Well, it turns out that the version at the time had major issues with dynamic lighting, meaning a lighting setup where the sun moves and you have various times of day on the same map, as opposed to static lighting, where different maps optimized for each time of day and weather are loaded, and the time or weather never change on the map. In addition to that, the engine also had issues with something called world origin rebasing. This is an issue that every computer game which has large open world maps has to deal with, as contemporary computers have a floating point problem. The issue is that real numbers cannot be accurately represented in a fixed space, which results in slight errors or deviations. Basically, you're supposed to get this, but you get this instead. In-game, this manifests itself as components attached to the players shaking when you're far away from the center of the map because their location coordinates begin to get slightly offset as the coordinate numbers grow in size due to the floating point problem. The solution is to create a chain of milestones from the center of the map to the player and calculate the position relative to the last milestone and its position from each subsequent milestone. In addition to that, it began to dawn on us that our skills from modding aren't sufficient for a commercial grade product. We decided to delay the game in the hopes that the issues would be fixed in later versions of Unreal Engine, while we focused on improving our graphics, because we didn't want to release a crappy product, but something that the community would actually enjoy. We had a lot to learn and we needed outside help. We needed to hire people. We needed a lot of help indeed, because our CEO and lead programmer Alex, who had managed everything up to this point, had just unexpectedly fallen ill and passed the responsibility onto me. I won't go into what happened as Alex didn't give me permission to, and we must respect his privacy. Alex is much older and wiser than me, and so here I was, 25 years old, with the responsibility of running the company, being a designer, and also managing our team with no experience to do it and nobody to ask. The only thing Alex told me was to make a plan. So I made a plan of everything that we needed, gave everyone in the team tasks and deadlines, and we started cranking out models. I had to learn to lead people, give feedback, write contracts, explain our vision to people that we intended to hire, and also hire the right people. This process was hindered by the fact that our team is multinational and some of our members live abroad where they have mandatory conscription, meaning all eligible men between the ages of 18 to 30 are drafted into the army for 12 months, and sure enough, an army truck pulled up at each of their front doors. Remember when I mentioned it was good that we opted for community funding instead of a bank loan or venture capitalist? At this point, we wouldn't have been able to meet our obligations and we would have had to declare bankruptcy, or the venture capitalists would have merged us with another company in their portfolio and that would have been the end of it. About a year later, Alex got better and was able to return to work. By this point, we had finished all the models, improved the models we had made for the original trailer, and even expanded the map from the originally intended small segment with Mitrovic to the entire smaller island, and even added a vehicle which was also unintended for the early access. I had learned and grown so much by now that it felt like he was gone for 5 years. In fact, over the course of this game's development, I feel as though I've aged like 20 years in terms of the way I make decisions and view things. Anyway, we were now beginning to work on optimization. However, that proved to be much more difficult than anticipated, as we thought that we could generate all the LODs in Unreal Engine automatically. But it turned out that we had to make a lot of them by hand, especially the really complicated ones such as the buildings, because the automatic feature couldn't handle that level of complexity. Besides that, the only things we had remaining to do at this point were the character animations, catch up with the programming, remember Alex, our lead programmer, was ill, and create the Steam page. We couldn't get the animations done before this point in the story, as we were quoted astronomical prices in the range of $50,000 to $100,000 by studios, which is beyond our reach. I mean, that's the price of a house. And it took us a very long time to find a studio that could make them for a reasonable price. We also couldn't get the Steam page up until now, as remember Alex is the actual CEO and he was ill. Only the CEO has the ability to arrange that. Just when you think you're back on track, boom, you get hit in the face with a baseball bat. It was 2019 and COVID-19 hit. The largest pandemic the world had seen since the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the 1980s. Countries all over the world began to lock down. Lawyers, government offices, and international travel were all shut down. How does that relate to the Steam page? Well, remember, our team is multinational, and signing important documents requires to be there in person. In addition to that, our company is located in Spain, so you need something called an NIE card to be able to do any sort of business activity in the country, which you can only acquire there at a police station in person. More on that in the next devlog. The good news was that Epic Games had just bought Quixel, which meant that we now got access to thousands of photoscan materials and models, and could improve the graphics of the game even more. The bad news was that our animation studio went out of business. A lot of people around the world went out of business, and our funding on Patreon took a severe hit. We had to let everyone except the core team go. Fast forward to the end of 2021, the pandemic situation had more or less stabilized. We decided to finally get a real physical office so that we could once again hire people to help us catch up with the programming. We decided to make the animations ourselves, and now that international travel has been more or less permitted again, we'll get back to finally solving the Steam page issue. So that's the end of the video. Hope you guys liked it. If you did, press the like button, subscribe to the channel, consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/TavianaTheOrigins. Thanks to everyone that's been rocking with us and supporting us. We'll continue to keep you guys updated, and I gotta go. Catch you next time.